Good evening, Gills fans. Welcome back to Gills in the Blood TV. Hope that you've had a safe day in the sunshine in the back garden with your loved ones today. The weather has been lovely, which is nice to see when you wake up in the morning, given the current circumstances, but at the same time, it's equally frustrating. We should have been going to the Priestfield today to watch Gills take on Accrington, and I did comment and said it would have been the first time that the shorts would have been out this season, but it's not to be. We're having to still abide by the government guidelines, the rules of only going out when we have to. So hopefully, to give you something to watch, I'm back this evening with part 3 of my Gills by position mini-series, and we move on tonight to midfielders. My 5 selections of the best that I've seen live during my time watching the club. So for the first one, we are going back all the way to 1991. That's when this player joined, and he stayed right through until 1997 before leaving to join Fulham. And he's coming up on your screen now. Midfielder Neil Smith, as I say, arrived in 1991, having failed to break through at then First Division side Tottenham Hotspur. And went on to play over 230 times for the Gills in his time in Kent. It was one of the earliest central midfield battlers that I really recall watching properly, watching the Gills. I started going regularly in the mid-90s, and he'd already been there for a couple of seasons, but just find it somewhat odd that Neil played for us when we was at our worst. Between 91 and 93, we really struggled. If you remember, 1993 was the season we nearly went out of business, nearly went out of the Football League. And I think if we'd lost at home to Halifax at the end of that 92-93 season, we probably wouldn't have a football club in this current guise to talk about. He was still there for a season after that, 94-95, when there was still the threat of liquidation. Then on the flip side of that, Smudger, as he was affectionately known, played for 2 more seasons, 95-96 and 96-97, and played a huge part in that early upward curve that we had under the stewardship of Tony Pulis once Paul Scally had taken over. Tigerish midfielder, knew his limitations. Technically, probably wasn't the best, Neil Smith, but what he didn't have in terms of natural ability made up for tenfold in aggression, willingness to run through a brick wall, tenacity. Yeah, just a proper footballer. That's a word I keep using in this series. He was a box-to-box midfielder, get up and down, wore his heart on his sleeve. Never's going to score you a million goals, and obviously the one that he's most famously known for was at Highfield Road, League Cup replay in 96-97, in that famous red Invicta FM kit. Lovely retro shirt. He scored the winner after the ball broke to him in the box. In fact, I've been watching the history of Gillingham FC on YouTube recently, and that's one of the latest ones that I've just watched. Yeah, brilliant finish. Picked his spot and drilled it into the bottom corner and sent us into the next round. Massive cup upset at the time. Coventry, managed by Gordon Strachan, were in the Premier League. Had the likes of Gary McAllister, Noel Whelan, Owen Jess, I think, playing for him at the time. Steve Grizovic was still in goal for him. Household name from the 80s and early 90s. And just a proper midfielder, like I say. And another abiding memory actually makes me laugh. And if you watch back through the 95-96 promotion DVD, he gets booked in a game for standing up, which is quite funny. He makes a tackle, slides, falls over, and as he goes to get himself up, the opposing player sort of falls over him, and for some reason the referee, and we talk about officials now, seems they were just as bad about 25 years ago, cautions him for standing up, which was quite funny. But yeah, Neil Smith, one of the first real memories of battle-hardened midfielders that I can recall, and he was certainly a really good player in that early transformation after Paul Scally became chairman. Right, from him, we move on a little bit further along to 1996. So Neil Smith would have played with this player. He joined from Watford. He needs no introduction. It is this man coming up on your screen. I, like myself, simply refer to this man as Mr. Gillingham. We're talking about Andy Hessenthaler. Probably the best £235,000 that Paul Scally's ever spent on a footballer during his time with us. He arrived from Watford, having started his career late, and he spent 10 years at the club, having initially arrived, like I say, in 1996. Served us unbelievably well as a manager, as a player manager. But it's definitely that first decade that he's most fondly remembered for, I think. Just each season that he featured in, we seemed to improve as a side, and if there were games where we needed dragging along and picking up, Hess was the man to do it. Captain fantastic. Small in stature, but massive in heart. Again, similarly to Neil Smith, but probably on a bigger scale, and that's no disrespect to Neil. Wasn't technically the best player. Was never going to be a modern day Steven Gerrard, Frank Lampard type, but boy could he battle, and he just never knew when he was beaten. And you always felt as a fan, and I imagine as a teammate, that if he was in the side and we were still in games, we could always get something. Never say die attitude. Sometimes he probably went across the line a little bit, but you need that. And I think if you'd taken that away from Hess, he wouldn't be half the player that he'd been for us. 96, 97, he helped us consolidate in the old Division 2, which is now League 1. 97, 98, he captained the side to within goal difference of the playoffs. I think I've already mentioned it on one of the previous instalments of this mini-series. Nicky Southall hitting the post late on in the last game of the season against Wigan. If it had dropped in, we'd have got into the playoffs. I think we'd have finished 4th. We ended up on 70 points with 3 or 4 other sides and missed out and finished 7th, which was a bit gut-wrenching. Then obviously 98, 99, we all know about that again. Hess, absolutely fantastic. All the way to the playoff final where we thought we'd seen off Manchester City. And we all know what happened. But yeah, I remember that season. I think we was on Sky at home to Bournemouth, and we'd been awful for an hour, and Bournemouth led 1-0. This was still when it was the old Raynham end. I think the Gordon Road had been redeveloped, so the Sky cameras were in that stand, looking across towards the old main stand, and the old Raynham end with the family corner still. And second half, Hess picked the ball up 30 yards from goal, drives forward 5 or 10 yards, and all right, he gets the help with a big deflection, but absolutely catches one sweet as a nut, and it flies in the top corner. There was absolute pandemonium in the Raynham end. I think we went on to win 2-1, a late goal from Kevin Lisby, young lad who was on loan from Charlton at the time. And I remember being towards the back of that old shed of a Raynham end. It was cold, it was damp. If it rained, you got leaked on. I remember one day someone having moss all over his head because Steve Butler had hit the gutter in. But if you could bottle up the emotion in that Raynham end that night when Hess first equalised and then Kevin Lisby snatched the winner, you'd sell it for millions of pounds. I remember being right near the back, and I ended up about 3 rows from the front. I managed to go over about 2 or 3 barriers without even realising. My mate, who I was going with at the time, lost his shirt in the bedlam. Don't know how that happened, but one of the great nights in the old Raynham end, and there were plenty. And then obviously the season after for Hess, 99-2000, we had to bounce back. We had to dust ourselves off and get ourselves off the floor after the heartbreak of Wembley. And it looked like it was happening again. We went to Wrexham the final day needing to win to get automatic promotion. Lost 1-0. 3-1 down with a couple of minutes to play in the first leg of the playoffs at Britannia Stadium. I'll get it right this time because I called it the Victoria Ground last night and I got told off by Barry Ashby on Twitter. But yeah, at the Britannia Stadium, Hess cuts in from the left, 30 yards from goal, arrows an absolute howitzer into the top corner in front of the away fans to get us back to within 1. We went on to win the second leg 3-0. And he'd already scored a playoff goal of importance, hadn't he, the previous season when he scored in the home leg against Preston to see us to Wembley. But yeah, and he had his battles throughout the years. Sean Gregan's one that stands out massively. Had loads of good battles with him in the late 90s and early 2000s. The famous one with Mark Viduka in the FA Cup game in about 2003. Viduka got sent off for swinging an elbow. Hess had done his job. But it wasn't just players. It was streakers that got tackled by Hess as well. He wasn't fussed. He took no prisoners. And he made over 370 appearances. And weirdly, in his first 3 seasons, he made 47 appearances in each of them first 3, which was a strange stat, which I found when I was doing the research for this. But an incredible player. Came back later on, didn't he, as a manager. from 2010 to 2012, just missed out on the League Two playoffs. Came back and helped us out again in 2014-15 as part of the Gang of Four. And I think if you ask any Gillingham fan to name 3 names that are synonymous with Gillingham Football Club, he'd be one of the 3 in 99% of fans' answers. And it was an absolute pleasure watching him. And he certainly will go down in Gillingham folklore. Right, player number 3 has the same surname as player number 1. That's probably a bit of a giveaway. He arrived in the summer of 1997 from Brentford, and that is this man coming up on your screen. Paul Smith, another central midfielder. We were blessed with absolutely brilliant players in that area in the late 90s, early 2000s. Some which haven't even made the cut. Such was the difficulty in picking this 5. But yeah, was with us 8 years, 8 full seasons in total. Paul Smith, incredibly, won Player of the Season 4 times. So every other season on average, which is a phenomenal record. Shows the consistency of the fella. Shows the ability of the fella. I think he was very understated compared to someone like Andy Hess. Just go about his work quietly. Wouldn't mind putting his foot in. Would go to war if he had to. Knew his limitations again. Would win the ball back off opposition players. Give it to those that could go and cause more problems further up the field. Unassuming in his work. Excellent professional. Rarely missed a game because of injury or suspension, which is what you want. Captain on plenty of occasions. And yeah, just a really, really proper professional who was a real joy to watch in probably the best Gillingham team that I've certainly seen and we've probably ever had. There might be those that watched us get promoted and win the title in 1964 that say different. But for me, part of the best ever Gillingham squad. Similar pattern to obviously Hess, that we seem to progress every season that Paul Smith was in the side, from just missing out on the playoffs to getting to the playoff final to getting promoted to then improving our finishing position in the Championship or the old Ensley League, Nationwide League, Division 1. Was never a big goal scorer. Played nearly 400 games and he probably scored less than 20 goals, but there's a couple of big ones in there. I think 97, 98, which we've already mentioned when we missed out on goal difference. It was his goal at Plymouth, penultimate game of the season, the final away day of the season, late on, that won the game for us 1-0. Weren't the cleanest of strikes from Smudger. I'm sure he'd be happy enough to admit that. Scuffed it into the bottom corner, but it won us 3 points and kept the playoff dream alive for at least another 7 days. It wasn't to be in the end, but probably one of the most important ones he scored at the time, certainly. And then he scored the 3rd vital one in the second leg of the playoff semi-final against Stoke in 99-2000. Because if you remember, we were 3-2 down from the first leg. Stoke ended up playing majority of the second half with 9 men. They had 2 players sent off. Colin someone and Graham Kavanagh both went. And we were 2-0 up, but still a bit twitchy. I think Stoke hit the post at 1-0. We weren't managing the game probably as well as Tony Pulis would have Peter Taylor, would have liked at the time. But Smudger settled all the nerves and sent us on the way to Wembley for the 2nd year in a row. And although he didn't start that playoff final at Wembley, can't really remember the reason why now. There must have been a good reason because he was a very good footballer. But he was held in such high regard by his teammates and his manager that he went up along with Adi Pennock and lifted the trophy that day once we'd seen off Wigan 3-2 after extra time. The very best of days at Wembley for the very best of sides that I've ever seen, and was well deserved. He stayed with us in the Championship. Like I say, helped us finish 12th, 13th and 11th in the old Division 1. Eventually left when we were relegated at the end of the 2004-2005 season. But it didn't diminish the impact that Paul Smith had. True warrior, true professional, and a massive part of our success back end of the 90s, early part of the 2000s. So a real joy to watch him. Next one, there's a theme here. It's going to be another player from that squad. I can't help myself but pick him. Was nicknamed Trigger. Wasn't the brightest tool in the box, bless him. But he had loads of ability. That's this man coming up on your screen now. 4 spells with the club Nicky Southall had. First arrived on a free transfer from Grimsby in the 97-98 season. And as I've already mentioned, hit the post, back end of that campaign, was within inches of getting us into playoffs. Wasn't to be. And yeah, his first spell lasted 4 years, 97 to 2001. Was part of the team that got promoted into the second tier. But I think he's probably more famous for a goal in an FA Cup tie. 29th of January 2000, we were hosting Premier League Sheffield Wednesday. We had a half-built Medway stand. We had John Motson for the BBC Match of the Day cameras in a temporary commentary box above us where we were sat, because I was in that temporary stand. As fans, we had Sheffield Wednesday fans half naked to our right, which was odd because it was the middle of winter. It was absolutely freezing. We trailed 1-0 at the break. We know what happened after the interval though. Mark Saunders and Andy Thompson scored to turn the tie around. And then Nicky Southall hit probably the cleanest volley I've ever seen live. Aside from maybe Tom Eaves. Wind assisted a little bit, but the technique was absolutely delicious. And Pavel Cernacek, God rest his soul, just watched it fly over his head and into the far top corner. Absolute pandemonium in the Priestfield Stadium. We were through to the quarterfinals for the first time in our history, the only time in our history. And I think every time FA Cup 5th round weekend comes around, that goal gets shown over and over again, which is a pleasant change from every playoff campaign that comes around and we have to watch highlights of the Man City game, which Nicky was part of. And he was part of the 2000 final as well. He was the player that got fouled by the Wigan fullback, Kevin Sharp. Might have pulled that from somewhere in the darkest depths of the brain. That reduced Wigan to 10 men, and they still threatened to try and turn us over, but we all know what happened and we got the job done eventually. But yeah, he left in 2001, Nicky Southall, went to Premier League Bolton. He's one of very few professional players to have played in all 4 divisions. I think he scored in all 4 divisions as well. But he returned after a couple of years via a loan spell at Norwich, I think in 2002. And he stayed with us in the Championship for 3 more seasons. Similarly to Paul Smith, he left at the end of the relegation campaign in 2005. And he left and he went to Nottingham Forest. And he came back again. And he spent 2 years with us between 2007 and 2009. And he was a senior head in a squad that had a lot of non-league players, a lot of youngsters under Mark Stimpson that got us promoted out of League 2 in 2008-9 when we saw off Shrewsbury, courtesy of Simeon Jackson. Didn't feature in the final, sadly, Nicky, having played a big part that season. I think his last appearance that campaign was the semi-final, second leg against Rochdale. I think he was left out entirely, actually, of the playoff final. Or even if he was on the bench, he certainly didn't get on because Mark Stimpson didn't make any changes. He did come back for one final spell between 2010 and 2012, but he only made one appearance against Dover in the FA Cup. But another one like Hess, like Paul Smith, like Barry Ashby in the defenders section, like Chris Hope, like Vince Bartram, that played a huge part in our success between probably 95 really. I know he wasn't there for all of it, but certainly from 1997-98 when he arrived right through to when the run in the Championship ended. He played a huge part in that, scored some memorable goals, got 30 in total, because played midfield, could also fill in at fullback if need be, play either side, was versatile. Obviously his role changed slightly when he became older and the legs started to go a little bit, but 30 goals in total for us, I think it was. Most prolific was that season when we got promoted in 99-2000 under Peter Taylor. He scored 13 in 59 that season. Really good for a midfielder. Certainly earned his move to the Premier League, and another one who's high up on the list of all-time appearance makers for the club, and it's well deserved because he was a very good footballer for us. Like I say, weren't the sharpest tool in the box, bless him. I always remember watching the 1997-98 documentary that was on Meridian, the old regional ITV, called The Football Club, and Mickey Galloway absolutely ripping him to shreds about gluing his hubcaps on because he didn't want him to get nicked and then getting a flat tyre on the motorway. But they're the sort of stories that you love to read about and hear about, especially going back to the days before social media. But Nicky Southall, the individual, not the most intelligent, bless him, or certainly didn't have the most common sense back then. But Nicky Southall, the football, unbelievable player, and a joy to watch for a long, long time as a Gillingham fan. Right, the last one I think we move on to is a lot more recent. He will certainly be picked by a lot of our younger fan members, and made his debut in 2012 as a teenager, having come through the youth ranks. Long hair, good looking, model looks. I think you know who we're talking about, but his name is coming up on the screen now. Bradley Dack, probably the most naturally gifted footballer I've seen play for Gillingham, and I've seen plenty of good footballers in my 30 years watching the club. Is it 30 years? Oh God, I'm old. Not as old as some, but older than plenty. 95, 2005, 2015, 25, at least 25 years, on and off early 90s when I could get there, but regularly from 95 certainly. But yeah, I'd say Dacky, technically, naturally the most gifted footballer I've seen live, and he's disappeared off into the Championship now, and it's well deserved, and he'll soon be back, fingers crossed, from his cruciate ligament injury and strutting his stuff in the Championship again, and then maybe moving on to the Premier League, which I think would be well deserved, because he's got all the tools in the box to be even better than he is now. But we had him for 5 years, from 2012 to 2017. He was a teenager when he made his debut under Martin Allen in the promotion-winning season from League Two. Featured predominantly from the bench. I think he went out on loan to Bromley during that campaign to get himself some minutes in adult football. Yeah, and just grew and grew from there. It was obvious from day one that he had plenty of natural ability. Was good with both feet, half decent in the air for not the tallest player. But yeah, was moved around under Peter Taylor early on in his time in the side. 2013-14 again was predominantly from the bench in League One. 2014-15 he started plenty more games, but he's been shoved out to the left, not played in his natural position. And I think there was actually talk, it might have just been social media talk to be fair, and in the press, that he might have been leaving, but thankfully it never happened. And then we got to see the very best of Dacky at that level. And like I say, he's now getting better and better with Blackburn. But Justin Edinburgh came in February 2015 and started playing Bradley in his natural position, which was the number 10, central attacking midfielder behind the strikers, and he absolutely thrived. And of his 38 goals in total for the football club, he scored 23 and 85 appearances under Justin. They were a match made in heaven. Got on really well on and off the pitch, as did pretty much the whole squad, I think, with Justin while he was with us. And that 2015-16 season was the one where we all dared to dream again that we might get back into the Championship, and we all know how it ended, but it doesn't take away from the fact that it was one of the best campaigns in recent years. But even from when he first arrived in February 2015, Dacky started to increase his output in terms of goals. I think he got 6 towards the end of that season under Justin. Scored in Justin's first full game on the touchline away at Peterborough. We won 2-1. And then 2015-16 was the season that really thrust Bradley into the limelight in terms of bigger clubs starting to circle. I think he got 15 in all competitions that campaign. We were top right up until January, February. And then we all know the wheels fell off. Dacky got injured, ripped hamstring. I think John Egan ripped hamstring as well. We tried to probably get him back too quick and it didn't really work. And that was the only disappointment from that campaign for Dacky, was that he probably came back and couldn't quite get back to the level that we needed him at to try and keep us in the playoffs. And we finished 9th, and it was the lowest position we'd occupied all season. But Dacky cleaned up at the Player of the Year awards. Understandably so. He was absolutely superb. I think he won League One Player of the Year that season as well as our own one. So that told you all you needed to know. 15 goals in total. Like I say, had the looks of a modern day footballer that you want. And he's now engaged to an ex-Love Island contestant, so he's doing all right for himself on and off the pitch. But on it, absolutely brilliant. Potentially stayed a season too long, because 2016-17 we struggled and he struggled. He only got 6 goals. But we did stay up on the final day. Dacky sat it out, I think, was on the touchline with Aaron Morris looking at Twitter updates and social media updates to make sure that Port Vale weren't winning at Fleetwood. But like I say, he had all the tools, had all the moves in his locker that you need to be a successful modern day footballer. He's athletic, he gets about the pitch, he works hard, he's good with his left foot, he's good with his right foot. And I think the thing for me is, never seemed to be hitting the ball too hard, Dacky. He never had to strike it with so much power, because he knew if he could get enough on it, he could work and manipulate the ball. And I remember a goal he scored at the back end of 2013-14. He come off the bench at home to Tranmere, still had shorter hair then, and we still didn't know a lot about him. But the ball dropped in the box and he had a touch, and I volleyed it into the far corner. We won the game 2-0, and I think it sealed us as safe from relegation. And I was sat in the Gordon Road that day, and I remember Stuart Nelson running the length of the pitch to join in with the celebrations with the rest of the squad. And that said to me how well loved Dacky was. And then he started more regular games after that, and just a few more goals that I've picked out. Obviously, Sheffield United at home, 2015-16 opening day, whipped it right-footed, but again, didn't try to hit it too hard. Just used the ball, used the defenders and curled it into the far corner. Bradford at home, January of that season, left-footed. Bent it into the bottom corner from 20 yards. A couple of weeks before that, Swindon drove into a dangerous area, picked a pocket of space, right-footed, bent it into the corner. Didn't have to strike it too hard again. Just knew where the goal was, knew where to put the ball, and knew how to manipulate it enough to beat keepers 9 times out of 10. Goal against Plymouth in the League Cup, little dink finish on the run. He had it all, like I say, and he's gone on and gone from strength to strength at Blackburn. And like I say, he was probably being talked about with a move to the Premier League before he unfortunately broke down with an ACL injury at the back end of 2019. But still at a decent enough age to get himself back, get regular games again, and he could go to the next level. But we didn't have him for long enough, we know that. But by God, did we enjoy watching him while he was with us, Bradley Dack. Right, that is my 5. There's plenty of honourable mentions. I've got lists of goalkeepers, defenders, midfielders everywhere. But go all the way back to 95, 96. Simon Ratcliffe, Dave Martin, proper warriors that helped us get out of the old 3rd division in Tony Pulis' first season in charge. If you go further ahead, you've got Mark Saunders. He's unlucky not to get in this top 5. Really, really good central midfielder. Who else we got? Ty Gooden, when we got promoted into the Championship, or Division 1, sorry, I keep referring to it by its modern day name. Matty Jarvis, another one, went on to play for England. Probably one of the last breed of natural studs on the touchline wingers. Played in the Premier League with West Ham. Really, really good player until injuries unfortunately curtailed his career. Jake Essenthaler, Andy's son, played nearly 200 games for the club after coming through the youth system. Mark Byrne, who's still with us but out injured. Really good midfielder, solid pro. Does exactly what he says on the tin. Josh Wright, 2 spells with us, helped us get promoted out of League 2 in 2009. Came back 2015-16, offered to train, offered to play for free, earned himself a contract and played a huge part in a very good season on the whole. Chris Welkdale, Charlie Lee in 2012-13, both arrived from Peterborough, I think it was, having been released by Tottenham as kids. Played a huge part in that promotion season under Mad Dog Martin Allen. There's loads and loads, and I've probably missed more out. So if I have, then tell me. But that's my top 5. Yours would be different, I know that. I'm looking forward to hearing who your picks are. Again, looking forward to hearing about those players that I never got to watch live because they were before my time. But Nick Palmer, I'm sure on Facebook, will give me some good stories. But that's what we want you to do. So comment on Facebook when it's on the page. Comment down below on YouTube. Speak to us on Twitter. We'll be back in a couple of days with the strikers section to finish this mini-series up. Keep staying safe, enjoy the sunshine, but in your own back garden. And until next time, up the Gills.